Let's pray. Father, we thank you for your word to us, and we pray as we come to explore it together this morning that you would speak to us afresh about a passage that we've probably all heard so many times. So we ask, Lord, to bless this time in Jesus' name. Amen. Sorry? No, after this. After this. She's just keen to get going again. We'll have to have a praise service where it's all singing. So we've got... I just thought, many of us have heard this passage so often, but I thought it'd be good to look at it slightly differently. There's so much that you could pick on to speak and talk about, but I thought I'd rather do it as a reflection today. So what I've done is I've written a sort of imaginative reflection on what it was like to be Peter at that moment, and actually told the story from his perspective. And I've told the story of him relating the story to people years later when they're asking him what it was like to follow Jesus. So for a moment, pretend I'm Peter speaking to you from the distant past. People often ask what it was like following Jesus. They imagine it was some sort of awesome experience of constant learning and growth, that Jesus was a serious and stern teacher, and that we were all model pupils, and that we all sat around eagerly soaking up every word that Jesus said, hanging on his every syllable like good disciples should with their rabbi. But it wasn't like that at all. It was chaotic and messy, often teaching as we walked or teaching around meals. And he would be teaching us as a core group or teaching the crowd or challenging the Pharisees and the scribes, and it was all sort of mixed in together. And there was so much walking. We never still. We were always moving from one place to another. Moving, perhaps, I think Jesus did this sometimes to manage the size of the crowds, because if we stayed in one place for too long, it just became unmanageable. But also it was to keep one step ahead of the authorities, because the Jewish authorities were out to get him, and so was Herod. So with all of that walking and that mess and that chaos, why did we follow him? Well, there was a love that's so hard to even begin to put into words that was around him, a presence that he brought with him, such authority, but so much laughter and life and joy, a deep, deep joy. When we were around him, it was electric. You couldn't get enough of being with him. You could feel him touching our very souls through the things he said. And that's before you even got to the miracles that testified as to who he was. And then our astonishment as we started being able to do miracles in his name. It was all just incredible. We all picked up different things at different stages, or at least we thought we did. We had moments of revelation and understanding, but mainly just loads of confusion. Brief flashes of insight. But that often led to more questions and more confusion. Like when I first understood that Jesus was the Messiah. We'd headed up towards Caesarea Philippi because the crowd had just got too big and Jesus wanted to go on a bit of a walk, I think. And we left Israel behind and the crowd started to thin. There was probably about 15 or 20 of us that were still there with him at that time. And there were still more, but they were following on at a distance. And actually, as we walked, I can remember, seemed like we'd been walking for ages. I'm a fisherman. I don't mind rowing, but walking is not my thing. Jesus was teaching. I just remember thinking about how aching my feet were and wondering when we were going to stop. John was listening intently as he always did because he was the best. And me, I was just walking in silence, my mind a mess. Confusion, it had just been one thing after another. More miracles, more teaching. A sense of something building was huge. I just knew that things were changing. It's like being swept along in a powerful current, struggling to come up for air and make sense of where we're going or what is going on. And in the midst of all of that going on in my head, I remember just clearly thinking at that moment, who is this man? And at that moment, as though Jesus heard my thoughts. He said, "Who do people say I am?" John, always quick to answer, said, "Well, some say John the Baptist." And James chimed in with Elijah. And then someone else said, "Oh, one of the prophets." And each time I heard that, I could thought, "Yeah, I've heard that." But it didn't feel right. There was something bigger happening here. Who is this man? Jesus stopped walking. Oh, what a relief. I hoped we were going to sit down. But he looked round at about the 15 or 20 of us that were there, and he said, "So who do you say I am?" As he looked round at us, he ended the question, looking into my eyes. And suddenly it all came together, like all the pieces fell into place. I had this rush of comprehension and elation, a real awakening, and like scales had fallen from my eyes, and I suddenly knew with complete clarity, or so I thought, he was the Messiah. He's God's Holy One. The one we'd been waiting for, the one who would restore Israel, the one that would make things right, the one that would get rid of all the pain and suffering, that would get rid of the Romans. And he had chosen me as a disciple. I could hardly contain my excitement as I blurted out, "You're the Messiah, God's chosen one." As I said this, you could see the dawn of realization dawning on the others around me too. And the group all sort of agreed, and the buzz and excitement grew. Some fell to their knees. There were shouts of joy, and we'd been waiting for so long. People started praising God. "Stop," Jesus said, just as the atmosphere was building. Above all the noise, his voice just cut through, and silence reigned again. A puzzled silence. And Jesus said urgently, "You must not tell anyone." My mouth fell open in amazement. "Master," I said, we have to tell people. People need to hear. We've waited so long. It's time for us to rise up. God is on the move. The Romans will flee. We're going to arrive at Jerusalem. You will be crowned king. You'll have power and influence, and Israel will be restored to its former glory. And Jesus raised his hand for silence. "You must tell no one," he said. "Not yet. There's much you don't understand. Your expectations are all wrong. Yes, we will go to Jerusalem, but the Son of Man will undergo great suffering. I'm going to be rejected. I'll be handed over to the authorities and killed. And after that, after 3 days, I'll rise again." I didn't understand. He taught so often in parables, I thought, well, it's another one of those. I did not understand. And I could see confusion and disbelief and doubt and disappointment in the eyes of the others around me. And I thought that he was confused. At last I'd really understood something. He was the Messiah. And there's such a strong feeling I had that I was right. Another strange feeling came over me that somehow I had to dissuade him from this course of action. I must stop him before more damage was done. So I pulled him to one side, interrupting what he was saying, and said, "Master," in a low whisper, "that won't be your fate. The Messiah comes in power to restore Israel. You'll be God's voice and his avenging arm. You can't be harmed. You are going to rule in glory." And looking back, even as I said it, it rang hollow. But I persisted. I somehow kept saying it, even though part of me felt this isn't right. He looked straight at me, like he could see right into my soul. "Get behind me, Satan," he said loudly. And the feeling that I needed to stop him just left there and then. And I was left feeling confused and ashamed. And I opened my mouth and said, I'm sorry. And Jesus just smiled and put his hand on my shoulder and said gently, "You're setting your mind on human things, not divine things. There is so much that you yet don't understand." At that moment, the crowd caught up with us, and he began teaching again. I didn't really listen to what he said. I was lost in thoughts as I wrestled again. So, who is this man? Clarity and confusion. I knew he was the Messiah, but I didn't understand why he had to die. One moment I had this certainty. The next, Jesus is telling me I'm speaking for Satan. One moment I felt I was basking in God's glory, and the next I'm a worm and an agent for evil. Elation and hope, and then shame and confusion and despair. That's what it was like following Jesus. Peter struggled, as we all do, with misunderstandings and misconceptions, moments of awakening and revelation, and I've got it, but what about? And how does that fit? Confusion. Same for us today. The disciples knew that the Messiah was going to come in glory and the kingdom of Israel would be restored, and the people of Israel would once again be God's chosen few in the world of a mess around them, and that everyone else would be outside and his people would be in. Today there are many Christians that have the same odd, confused views about heaven and prayer and who's in or out, or who's God's people in different ways. We can have moments of excitement and revelation as we feel God has answered prayer in some way, and then lots of confusion of doubt when prayers we feel aren't answered. In all of this, the most important question to ask ourselves is, who is Jesus? Was he just a great teacher? Was he a prophet in some way? Was he John the Baptist or Elijah? Was he just someone at the right time that came up with a few catchy sayings that caught on? and then somehow, miraculously, the world was changed. Who is Jesus? Is church really just a movement for social justice, for fellowship on a Sunday morning where we can all sing together and have a good sense of something nice? Or is it something more? Is church something, or Jesus just one thing that we think about amongst many? Or does Jesus help to be more central in everything that we do in life? Jesus didn't come to start a religion. He came to start a revolution. A revolution that is still changing the world today. And he calls us to work with him to be part of that revolution in so many different ways. And a small part of that, in some ways, what we do here on a Sunday morning, but it is so much more than that. The question and how we, or the way we respond to his call depends on how we think, or who we think he is. Who is Jesus? Imagine maybe that you were there on that day, walking with tired feet towards Caesarea Philippi. Maybe if you want to, for a moment, close your eyes. And as Jesus stops and looks at you, he asks you the question, who do you say that I am? Father, as we look to follow your Son, we pray that in the midst of the chaos and confusion, you would give us those moments of clarity, that you would inspire us again to know that your Son is the Messiah, the Son of God, present with us even now today through his Spirit. We pray you'd give us those certainties in our hearts, and that you would help us to truly listen to what he is saying as he calls us to become the people that we could be. In his name we pray. Amen.